The following is my conversation with Tyler Benedict. Tyler is the founder of Bikerumor, the world's foremost cycling tech blog. He is a serial entrepreneur and has had a front row seat in the world of cycling, especially digital cycling media, for the last 15 years. Thank you, Tyler Benedict of Bikerumor, for coming on today. And it's really great. We've known each other for a while, but it's cool to have you on today. I'm excited to talk about kind of your history and, at Bikerumor. You're one of, the main people in cycling media, especially on the digital side. So I'm excited to talk about kind of your journey and kind of what you're seeing, what you've seen, what you've been through, and then kind of what you're seeing on the horizon for cycling media. So thanks for being on.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Excited to have this conversation.
So I guess I always ask people this, how did you get started in cycling? Is that something you've always been passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, the passion kind of came in college, basically kept stealing my roommate's mountain bike to go ride until he got so fed up with me that I got my own. But I mean, I rode bikes, as a kid to school almost every day. My first Huffy, I still reminisce about that thing so fondly. I swear they were made different back in the day, right? Or I just didn't know to recognize the difference. But like that thing was awesome. It was red and white. I mean, I really remember that thing really fondly. And graduated from that to a Mongoose Decade BMX bike that I saved all summer for, and then it got stolen like a month later because I bought like a $8 Walmart chain, those plastic coated chain locks, because as a kid I didn't know any better. It was like seventh or eighth. Then I got the what was it, the Centurion Le Mans, the red and white Ironman. I think it was the Ironman, but it was the red and white one. It was pretty popular bike. That was my first kind of like quote unquote real bike, and ended up riding that to high school on and off. Just of course, back then everybody got licensed as soon as they turned 16. So I did too, got my car. But still rode it. And one day I thought it would be kind of fun to, see if I could feel the slope of the road. Because, roads are generally designed to slope off to either side so the rain runs off. And I was like, I bet you I could ride in the middle and I'll feel if I'm veering to the right or left. And like I had just pulled out of my driveway. I'm going down my street to get, to school. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna close my eyes and feel it. And so not even like 2 seconds later, it just came to a very abrupt stop as I hit the front of a car and flew up, and my chin hit the windshield pillar. And I just like walked back home and had to take care of that. I still got a scar on my chin from that one.
Get some stitches.
And stitches. And it was that it bent the frame. It didn't break the fork of the wheel. It bent the frame. It crumpled the top tube and down tube to where the front wheel was behind, the edge of the front wheel was behind the top down tube. And it sat in my garage like that for years. And finally, when I went to college, I was like, man, I need a bike. So I took it to a shop to see if they could fix it. And somehow they like muscled it back to barely rideable. But the front end on that thing was so steep. It was so sketchy. So anyway, yeah. And then I got a Bianchi and Niala hardtail steel mountain bike and rode that thing for a long time.
And then I guess we can get into Bikerumor. So Bikerumor, how did that start? What was kind of the genesis of Bikerumor?
Well, there's a big gap between that Bianchi and Bikerumor for sure. The genesis was the super short version of it. Like after college, I worked a couple of real jobs for a while and just absolutely hated it. Even working for my dad, right? Like could have potentially taken over the family business and just wasn't for me. Like I just make a terrible, terrible employee because if I'm not super excited and passionate about something, I cannot get motivated to do the work. And that was the case there. And, few of the clients that we had were doing some stuff in the nutraceutical space. And that was really fascinating to me because as a mountain biker who was doing like the local and regional races, poorly, my thought was, well, I don't have to train as hard if I'm doing the supplements right. And so I spent a lot of time, energy, and money on stupid supplements thinking they'd make me faster. Meanwhile, all my friends that just rode more got way faster. But talking to these guys, I realized like, hey, if you have an idea for a product, you can make it. And so I kind of came up with my own sports drink mix and got lucky with a few trademark things that I sold some IP, and that kind of gave me the real startup capital
So you
to do that.
maybe explain a little more. So you were working for your dad, and you had a lot of contact with supplement companies.
Yeah, one of the clients was some doctors that were doing a product, and I asked them like, "Well, where are you guys formulating? Where's your lab?" They're just like laughing at me, like, "No, we don't do any of that. We tell people what we want in it, and somebody makes it for us." I'm like, "What?" Like the whole world of private label manufacturing was my eyes were wide open all of a sudden.
And what kind of business does your dad have? Does your dad have?
It was an ad agency, so they were a client. We were
Okay.
doing the marketing and label design and branding and stuff for them.
Okay, cool. And so you just decided, you're like, I want to try this, because I've known you for a while, and you do have this sort of fearless mentality of just jumping into things. Is that
I think
fair?
it's a good idea. I'll jump into it. I'll try anything with it. Often far too little research in advance, but it's fun, right? I learn a lot, and it keeps it interesting.
So you designed some proprietary supplement drinks, and you sold the recipe.
Not really. I came up with a formula kind of based on what I was seeing in the market at the time, which was, a lot of people were watering down Gatorade or letting Coke or Mountain Dew go flat. And, it was basically, they wanted the sugar and they wanted the caffeine, but they didn't want the citric acid. It was just like tearing up your stomach, right? And if you ever try drinking Gatorade at full tilt, it's not, your stomach doesn't like it. So I came up with a sports drink that had a little bit of caffeine, all the right carbs and electrolytes, and no citric acid. So it was super, super mild. The flavor was okay at best, but it worked really, really well. And when I came up with it, I called it Propel, which, if everybody knows the Propel fitness water, that was owned by Quaker at the time, and then Pepsi bought Quaker Oats and owned it. But I got really lucky with the timing of the trademark, because I filed the trademark literally like a day or two before they tried to. And so they just bought the trademark off of me, and I just changed the name of it. And I was only like a month into it at the time. So so that kind of gave me the startup capital. And I got that check and told my dad, I was like, yeah, this isn't working out. I'm going to go do this. And he totally understood. They were probably happy to get me out of there. I mean, I was literally bringing down morale at the office.
Well, I think in my experience, the failures teach you the most, right?
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, I think those lessons hit harder, so we tend to remember them, whereas like the successes were chalk it up, human nature, I think, is to chalk it up to like, well, I'm so smart, I can, whereas the failures like, what, the smart people try and figure out what went wrong, and the other people blame somebody else for those failures, right? And so I always definitely try and figure out what went wrong, because I don't want to repeat that. And I'm always trying to figure it out, right? And I even look at other people's businesses, right? And when we start talking about the media, right, like I'm really interested in what's going on now with some of these other projects, because I'm trying to figure out like, well, what are they doing? What do they know that I don't know? Why are they doing it this way and that way? And what could I learn from them?
Right. And that's what's so beautiful about today is, it's a double-edged sword, because everybody sees what you're doing, so it can be copied really quickly. But I guess going back, but going back to, so you had some capital, you were able to sell some IP just because you had kind of this entrepreneurial spirit, very curious, it sounds like, all in line with, I've known you for a little while, and it totally ticks all the boxes of what I've seen. And so then you had some capital, and what was the first thing that you started doing, I guess, that became Bikerumor?
Yeah, so we had the powdered sports drink mix that kind of morphed, because we looked at the market with energy drinks, and they were just kind of coming into the US and blowing up, and we made the decision to shift into that, which was a terrible decision for a lot of reasons. We lost so much money for like 6 years trying to do energy drinks, and just lost money constantly.
Jeez, so that's got to be brutally competitive.
It's brutally competitive in that everybody saw the margins. I mean, literally there was 10, 20 new energy drinks every week for the first couple of years of it, because the margins are ridiculous.
2002, 3, 4, around there. What are we talking?
Yeah, pretty much. I think we launched ours called Burn in 2001 or 2, somewhere in there, because we shut it down in 2008 when I launched Bikerumor.
I've heard of Burn. You were an investor?
Yeah. What's that?
You were an investor?
Well, no. So I owned it. I came up with the trademark for Burn energy drink. We own burnenergydrink.com. And
what I've would I've seen that in Nebraska?
You might have for a minute.
Okay.
But so Coca-Cola owns a Burn energy drink in about 30 other countries, and I believe it's still around.
Okay.
So if you ever go to Europe or some part of Asia, and a lot of other places, if you see a black can with a little yellow and orange flame, that's Coca-Cola's Burn. Well,
Okay.
I had the domain name and I had the US trademark, and so when I and my investors got tired of losing money for so many years, and nobody wanted to put more into it, we just kind of made the decision was obvious. It was sort of made for us, right? Like we couldn't afford more inventory, couldn't keep doing what we were doing. So started the process of winding it down, and I put out some feelers for the IP, the trademarks, the formula, et cetera, and sent my letters to Coke and Pepsi and everybody else. And got all the reject form letters. Hey, thanks, whatever, but we're not interested. And then like a week later, I got a letter from a Delaware corporation that was a subsidiary of Coke that said, yeah, we'll buy, and we'd be interested, and made an offer. And I did a god awful job of negotiating, but sold that, covered most of the debt. And even though most of the debt still took, the remainder took my wife and I 10 years to pay off. Like,
Wow.
it took a long time to pay that off. But had we not sold the trademarks and the IP to that company, we would have had to declare bankruptcy. And so, but as the writing was on the wall on that, and we started winding it down, I'm like, all right, what am I going to do? Because obviously I'm not going to go get a real job, because that would suck. So I, just started kind of looking at what was out there, and I've always been able to write well, and I was a really big fan of Engadget, the tech blog. I like their format, right? Is the blog style, just like here's what's new, and the new stuff is always at the top. Super simple, super clean, easy to read, easy to skim, see what was new, and if you are interested in something, you click on it and read more. And there was nothing like that in the bike space. You had the big ones at the time were Velo News, and I think maybe Cycling News was going then. But it was all race coverage, race topic stuff, and most, if not all, of the magazines at the time, the print magazines, their websites were nothing more than a landing page to try and get you to subscribe to the print publication.
Sure, because that was
and we're talking 2008. So Bikerumor went live in July of 2008. And you had Pez Cycling, which was again more race coverage focus, but a very, very different visual layout. Just tons of tiny little boxes and things and links and headlines, and it was just kudos to those guys, because they're still crushing it, but visually it was just not appealing to me. So I wanted to create the kind of cycling tech site that I wanted, and I didn't care about racing. All I really care about, and still pretty much to this day, is like the shiny new things, right? Like what's the newest, coolest, lightest, fastest, awesomest component, part, bike, tech. And that was just where my interest was, and there was nothing serving me. So I just made it, because it was, I didn't even know what WordPress was at the time. And I sketched it all out. Like I built the template I wanted it to look like in Illustrator, pixel perfect layout. And I sent it to a site builder, and they're like, oh yeah, this would be a WordPress site. I'm like, all right, well, what's WordPress? And, long story short, they built it, and it's definitely gone through a few iterations design wise over the years, but it's back then it cost me $2,000 to launch Bikerumor, because I had no idea how to build a site. Now with all the templates and drag and drop and WYSIWYG editors, I mean, as you know, like anybody can launch a website in 5 minutes now for $0. It's pretty remarkable.
Totally. And even 2000 at the time, wasn't a huge investment in terms of getting off the ground. But so you got the site up and started putting content up, and how often were you posting at the beginning?
I mean, every day, right? It's just, I figured, I was using Engadget as the template, right? Or the role model, and that, well, man, these guys are posting constantly, right? I'm looking at, I come back the next morning and like 10 new things have been posted overnight. It's like, all right, well, I just got to, if I want to do this, I need to crank out content. And I went, I'm trying to think, I think I went to Interbike that first year, because we launched in July, and Interbike at the time was always in like September, October. It was pretty late in the year. I think I did, if I can't remember, but if not, I definitely went to Seattle the next year, because I was like, look, if this is going to be a business, I need to treat it as such, and I need to put the money into it to do. So, I booked the flights, booked the hotel, went to these events, and just walked around and started introducing myself. I mean, I knew a few people from the industry just from with the sports drink and the energy drink. We had always sponsored a lot of bike events and, gone to like the Northern Nationals and stuff. So I met a few people, but it was really just walking the aisles, booth to booth, introduce myself, say, hey, I'm Tyler with Bikerumor. I'm covering what's new, like let's do something. So, doing what we're still doing today, which is just walking around, talking to every single booth and seeing what's new and covering the big guys, covering the little guys. And I think that's what it was, not only the volume of coverage, but it was the fact that we were covering everybody and everything, where, I mean, first of all, we were the only ones doing that online, that kind of like blog roll and tech coverage too.
Because everything
so
else,
we had that going for us.
and everything else had to go through the filter of perhaps like it had to be a certain level, or it just, there wasn't that volume. So like the smaller guys just didn't get coverage. Is that kind of how what it was like back then?
Yeah, for sure. And that's, like, and the super early part of Bikerumor too is like we were competing with print, right? So we could pump stuff out months before it would show up in the magazines. And if it were like, like a specialized launch a new bike, you'd see that on Velo News or Pez or whatever, right? But like if, whatever the equivalent back then, I can't even think of it, of like a wolf tooth components, right? Like when they were first starting, right? Like nobody would cover them. Or if you did, it would show up as like a 2 sentence blurb in a magazine 3 months after it launched, just because of, publication timelines and stuff. And so we were able to get all the small brands and startups and everybody enamored with us because we were the only one giving them press. And, it's just one of those things where like I was doing freelance copywriting, graphic design, and all kinds of other crap on the side to pay my bills while I launched this. So I just kept pumping it out because for me, it was like there was no downside to publishing more. And there was no reason why I couldn't, because I felt like every ounce of energy I put into this was going to at some point benefit me later on.
Sure.
So I just kept doing what I could do. And, it just SEO, I was learning SEO as it went, and it just kind of like picked up. And every month I'd see like, okay, now we got, I think the first month we had like 100 page views, right? And then it was like 300 page views, and then 500, and then 2000. And then, so it was a very quick ramp up, and the ramp got pretty steep month after month for a long time. And yeah, I mean, I can keep going, but tell me if you got some questions you want to throw in.
It's good. It's cool to see, I could tell that it was probably an exciting time for you in your life. And so the model, I guess, for people that don't know, so you were building content to get visitors that then you could obviously, be able to then sell ads so you can kind of support the business model. But with Bikerumor, the most interesting thing that when I first heard about Bikerumor was how tenacious the comments are.
Huh.
Can you tell me about that a little bit? Like, well, why that is?
I don't know. Maybe because we allowed comments. I mean, I think I'm going from memory here, so there might be some inaccuracies now and then. But like I'd heard that they're up to a point Velo News allowed comments, right? Until all of a sudden they didn't, because people were just so mean that they were bringing some editors to tears, right? And so they just stopped it. And there's certainly merit to not having comments. What's funny is if you look at the comments that Pink Bike gets, the volume just 10 to 100 times the comment volume that we ever got on Bikerumor, and they quickly devolved into just mom jokes and completely irrelevant, completely off topic. I mean, you look now and their posts get 100+ comments on almost every post. It doesn't matter even what the post is about. I think people are just using it as a conversational forum more than anything.
No, but the comments on Bikerumor, I remember, were critical. If a product wasn't, it was not critical, but definitely constructively critical at times. But yeah, you had to, like, it was no holds barred, in a sense that like the people that came on there, they seemed like power users. They seemed like they worked in the industry, or they knew the industry really well. So I mean, the community you guys had was seriously like had some authority. I mean, that's what I took from it.
Yeah, true. Maybe, for better or worse, maybe we didn't moderate it tightly enough. But yeah, we let people comment, and yeah, some of them were harsh, not just on the product sometimes, but sometimes on us, for the way we wrote it. I still get people still comment on mine about my grammar, and I'm like, I'm pretty good at grammar, and I'm like, really? Yeah, it's funny. But yeah, I think to your point, I think it did show that we had a pretty technically savvy audience, and people really cared about what we were writing about. The funny thing is, I heard from some brands, very few, but there were a couple that were hesitant to run stories with us because they were afraid of what the comments might say, which, I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, but
Right. So Bikerumor starts taking off like a rocket ship, and then it sounds to me like, you began to kind of get in the rhythm, and it grew. How many, at a certain point, I imagine you had to hire some people, and so it got bigger. And then at a certain point, I know that I think it was a couple of years ago, that you ended up selling your ownership in Bikerumor. So tell me about what brought that on.
yeah. So I'll try and knock those out in sequence, kind of in the timeline. Yeah, definitely had to hire people. I mean, there was just too much stuff to post. People kept sending us press releases, and I certainly couldn't do it all on my own. And I got really lucky here because I think it was almost my own fault led to a really good outcome, in that I just like to keep my businesses super simple, as simple as humanly possible. I mean, whereas there's all these project management and task management softwares that are now in use at Bikerumor and a lot of other places, right? Like, we set up a system with email because everybody knows how to use email. It's super simple. And we managed our content inbound and what was going to get posted just via different inboxes for years, and it worked great. So simple. And kind of the same with people. I had like Cerise and Mark Basilier were two of my earliest. Zach for sure was the earliest. They reached out, and basically there were other people that reached out, and I would talk to them a little bit, and then they just drop off. Whereas those three in particular, in the early days, they just kept bugging me. And finally, I got off my ass and set them up with an account and wrote a style guide and a manual on how to post, and made it work. But I think in hindsight, what that meant was these people really wanted to do this, and they actually followed through and persisted and bugged me enough to where it was. And so what I ended up with, no special strategy or skill on my own, were people who actually gave a shit about what they were doing. And, we consistently, and still to this day, pump out far more content per writer than any other cycling news site out there. I mean, it's just unbelievable what our team does, and now it's Corey and Jesse May and Zach and Jordan are the main ones. Steve is freelance. And then we've got a couple others that are, in kind of like a newsroom setting that can write for us and Gear Junkie and a couple of the other sites in our current portfolio. But it was just sort of dumb luck and my own obstinance and laziness to some regard that helped me get these people that were phenomenal writers and actually cared about what they did. Because we'd go to the shows or we'd get something in at some odd hour, and one of us would jump on it, no questions asked, no complaining, right? And we'd go to the shows and we'd cover 10 times as much as everybody else, stay up late, get up early the next morning, and still manage to go have beers and dinner with friends and industry people and just build incredible relationships. And it's rare, and I'm not trying to knock any other outlet, but it is rare to find that hustle in any industry, right? Somehow I ended up with A players all around.
Yeah, that's amazing. And
Yeah.
you still don't know how it happened. It just happened.
Like I said, man, I think it just I made them try hard enough to join just by me being so complacent about it that it ended up with the ones that were really good. And I think, again, trying to keep it simple, right? It's I just kind of let them do what they wanted to do, right? They had their own interests. Zach was super into fat bikes and more than anybody else. So he covered fat bikes and he could write whatever he wanted about fat bikes. There was no real editorial calendar. There was no real, I don't want to say structure, because that's, we had a format, but people could just do what they wanted to write about. And we all geeked out about enough stuff that we just had tons of stuff on the page constantly because we were excited to write about it.
And there's something about cycling that, you know, lights that fire inside people, right? That they're just so passionate about it because it is, you know, it's something that you do. There's a community around it. It's something that you do, you know, it's a hobby. So you're doing it because you want to do it. And so it sounds like these people that get to do it as a job, for them, it's like, you know, it's a dream. And so they're putting that much more effort into it, is what it sounds like to me. And I see that in
Yeah.
other situations in the cycling industry, because there's lots of times when if you want to be in the cycling industry, don't think you're going to make very much money for, you know, certain periods of time, because it is a passion, you know, it's a passion project at times.
Yeah,
So
for sure. The perks are good though, right? Like there's a lot of travel, a lot of bikes, components and stuff that head our way. So yeah, the experience side of it and the lifestyle side of it is top notch.
so it sounds like the brand is humming along, the site's humming along, and then what happened?
There was nothing happened really that triggered it. You know, I mean, traffic was what it was. And this was probably comes back again to my trying to keep it super simple, right? Like there was certainly some opportunities that I missed, some things that I saw others doing that I just didn't pay enough attention to. You know, video being one, right? Like you had all of a sudden, you know, and I think there's some other reasons why GCN blew up. You know, they had a lot of backing and support that really helped them get off the ground quickly and well funded. But they also just ran with that, right? Like they took the opportunity, ran with video, and they just crush everybody on video now. You know, I would never try and compete with GCN on video. They simply own that market across like every channel, you know, or every topic, every format, right? Product reviews, rides, race coverage, and now you know they just got the rights to the National Cycling League coverage for the U.S. for that upstart, right? So it's really hard to compete with that, and they did it super well, you know. So and then there's other stuff, you know. Affiliate was one that I ignored for far too long, and really I ignored up until we sold it. So the point of all that is that we were really happy and really good doing what we were doing, which was producing tech coverage in a written blog style format, and just kept doing it. And so without me knowing what else to do to grow the company or how else to drive new revenue channels and all this, we were pretty static for a few years, like literally 3 years of, you know, pretty static revenue, pretty static site traffic. So it wasn't declining, but it wasn't growing. And I was having a conversation with my friend Steven, who was the founder of Gear Junkie, in late summer of 2020. We're just chatting, you know, talk for like an hour about whatever, right? Because we'd always, you know, frequently just bounce ideas off of each other as founders and friends. And at the end of the call, he's like, "Oh, hey, I didn't tell you, I sold Gear Junkie earlier this year." I was like, "Well, that seems like a big deal." Yeah, so we talked about that, and then, you know, literally at the end of the call, it's just jokingly, it's like, "Well, you know, if they ever want a bike site, you know, let me know. We should talk." And he's like, "Yeah, actually, we should talk." And so we did, and, you know, kind of ripped through that pretty quickly because we were trying to get the deal done by the end of the year. So between, you know, August and December, we put together the numbers and I sold Bikerumor to, it was Lola Digital Media. It's rebranded to All Gear. And yeah, so we joined the portfolio with Gear Junkie, and there's some other sites in there that a couple of them are gone now, but there's I Run Far, and there's a Switchback Travel. You know, they just acquired the Inertia, which is like a surf and ski. And yeah, it's a good, well-rounded portfolio of kind of covering all the real outdoor activity bases now.
So it was a matter of just, you felt like that whole project had, at least in your view, had kind of run its course for you, and you were ready to kind of turn the page from an ownership standpoint.
You know, it wasn't on my mind when I had that first call, but, you know, the more I examined it, I was like, you know, I think I've done what I can do with this, right? Like my skill set is getting it to point B.
Sure.
Somebody else is going to be better at taking it from B to C and D and beyond that, right? Like I'm really good at startup concepts and building something, but then I very often get to a point where I don't know what else to do to grow it more, right? Or how to take it to the next level. I think you hear that with a lot of smart entrepreneurs, where at some point they bring in a CEO to run it
Sure.
for them, right? So they can
Totally.
focus on what they're good at. And I certainly wasn't in a position to bring on an outside CEO, but it was a good opportunity to sell it. And, you know, timing wise, I think we got lucky with everything that happened with the pandemic.
Sure.
And,
Yeah, it would have been hard
you know,
today to do the same thing.
yeah, very hard. And you know, this is the other thing I'd love to chat about. Is kind of like leading into talking about the state of media today, right? Is much like I said, I would never try and start a video channel to compete with GCN, right? Like I would never start Bikerumor now, because what we did different back in 2008 was created a format that nobody else did. And very, you know, you saw the media landscape, the digital media landscape change, where, you know, MTBR went from predominantly a forum to covering news in a blog style format, much, you know, very similar to us. And now you have a ton of sites doing the exact same thing, right? It's like everybody is trying to get that news coverage first, and in a blog style format of the newest thing at the top, right? And that's just, that kind of coverage is sort of a commodity, and there's so many people doing it so well. I still would argue that Bikerumor pumps out more than anyone of good, deep technical coverage, right? Like we're not trying to be all things to everybody. We're focusing on the products and tech, and in that niche, I still think we're the best out there. But there are a lot of people doing that, and so I don't know how you would launch something like that now and break through the clutter and gain an audience, short of just plugging away at it for a couple of years and kind of hoping somebody else is going to quit. You know?
Right.
So yeah, so we had that going for us, where I just did something that was unique at the time. And so
Sure.
I think the challenge now for anybody trying to get into the media side of it, or the brands too, right? Like I was thinking about this morning because I saw a pretty killer new gravel shoe launch, and I thought about it for a second. I was like, you know, there's a million gravel shoes out there, but this one is actually unique. There's several features about it unique. The story behind it's unique. I was like, okay, so this one stands a chance because it's got a bunch of stuff going for it. It's not just trying to look and feel the same as everything else. So I think any product needs to look at the current marketplace and figure out, what can we do differently, and why is anybody going to care about what we're doing? And from a media standpoint, you know, it's hard, right? There's only so many formats you can do, right? You know, there's video, there's audio podcasts, there's blog style formats, and then there's print if you want. I mean, I think there's still some viability to print in certain circumstances, but you have a very finite number of formats that you can do. So how do you take one of those formats and then also make it so unique that it's going to stand out from the hundreds of YouTube channels, right? Hundreds of podcasts, hundreds of websites.
Sure. And so right now, what you're seeing, I guess you have a pretty unique view on what's happening in the US, because, you know, that's your main market. I'm based in Europe, as you know, but coming from the US, I know there's been a lot of consolidation happening right now in the media. I don't know if you want to talk about like kind of what you're seeing, what's happening over there, kind of from a high level in terms of cycling media in general.
Yeah, I have a few opinions. The first thing I've noticed, and this is kind of a trend I've noticed for quite some time, is that there is a real lack of new voices and faces coming into the media space in terms of like content producers. And I say that not talking about like the independent, you know, like, hey, I have a YouTube channel, hey, I have a podcast, or hey, I have a blog. It's more like if you look at the major outlets that we all know, right? Like Bikerumor, Cycling Tips, Pink Bike, all the other ones that for some reason all of a sudden are escaping me. It's a lot of the same voices and people that have been there for a really long time. There's not a lot of young, fresh voices coming into the space, which is really dangerous. And I think, you know, my personal hunch is I feel like as social media has grown and everybody has their own platform, I think the mindset of work has changed, where why am I going to bust my ass to produce a product, in this case content, for somebody else, when I could, you know, have that short-term pain of, you know, maybe it takes me a year or two or three to build this, but all of a sudden now I own my output and all of the benefits come to me. And I think especially the younger crowd is so used to posting on social and trying to build their following that they don't really want to build a following for somebody else.
That's really interesting you say that, because basically you're saying that because people can publish on their own on all the channels that are out there, that the talent is maybe opting to build their own channel.
Could be. And then also, I mean, let's be honest, the pay in the cycling media sucks too. So they could be looking at it like, well, especially if you have a college degree that you're paying off, right? I could go get a job, and in the afternoons and evenings and weekends, I can be producing content on this thing. And, I'm having fun anyway. I'm riding my bike, doing this cool stuff, making this content that I enjoy.
Sure, it's a grind.
And maybe it becomes a business, right? I mean, I know a few people that have full-time jobs that are staying up till probably 1 or 2 in the morning and waking up to go back to the job, but they're staying up to produce that content, and they've built something pretty incredible, but it's taken 3 or 4 or 5 years to do that as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that's one challenge facing legacy media. And, it's funny that I'm using the word legacy to refer to digital media now, but, we've been at
Sort
it
of is. Yeah. I mean, you've got
15 years.
You've got TikTok. I mean, let's just kind of step back. So we've got legacy media, we've got print, we've got blogs, we've got YouTube, we've got Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. And I don't know, I feel like
Podcast, obviously,
and of course podcast. Yeah, but I feel like TikTok is one that I think we're going to be seeing a lot more of, as well as YouTube. It's just people are consuming so much more video now. Is kind of what I'm seeing.
Oh,
so
yeah.
And maybe what we're saying is that all these other channels are sort of just fragmenting the audience in a really kind of important way to all these other channels. And so that's probably why we're seeing some of the consolidation in the bigger media, perhaps, as of right now. So where all these smaller channels are showing up. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess for someone that wants to get into this at the beginning, like, do you have some advice for someone that wants to get into this business?
Yeah, I do. But before diving into that, let's talk about the consolidation for a second. So I think, and this is just my opinion, and clearly, like, I still write for Bikerumor. I do the podcast for Bikerumor, and but I have no ownership anymore. No, I'm not responsible for any of the management decisions at all. So I honestly, I have like no access to any of that data and information, even the decision-making process. I have zero insights to what's going on there internally now, other than just what affects me as a content producer for Bikerumor. So with that disclaimer said, looking at it from both the inside and the outside with consolidation is it is a numbers game, right? So I won't name the brands, but there were some big non-endemics, meaning non-cycling brands that, with a combined audience and reach between Bikerumor, Gear Junkie, and Ironfire, and all these other sites in the portfolio, right? Like, if you look at what our traffic was individually, it was okay. But when you combine that, you can all of a sudden reach a massive, massive audience. And so, I'm going to use car brands as an example, right? So car brands hire a big ad agency to do their ad buying. A big agency, and I'm talking like the ones in New York with an office on 3 or 4 floors and, hundreds of people on staff. That level of agency is not going to go to 50 different little websites and blogs and stuff to do media buys. They want to go to one point of contact where now they can buy across 5 or 6 very targeted platforms. That's more targeted than what they could get if they were just running an ad through Google AdSense or something.
Sure.
Which those ads could show up everywhere, right? Here you can say, okay, yes, I like this portfolio that reaches outdoor enthusiasts and I want to reach them. And now, boom, I'm reaching, 5-10 million people a month with this one buy. Great. That could be a substantial dollar amount deal. Well, as independents, we're never going to see those deals. And so there's people that realize this, and they see a site like Bikerumor that had potential. And, for us, without doing much affiliate, we were leaving a lot of money on the table every month. So you look for these opportunities and you kind of bundle these things into the portfolio that you can go sell much bigger ad packages on, and it makes a lot of sense. So I think that's where you see the consolidation, why you see the consolidation happening. There was one, without naming names, everybody could probably figure it out, that acquired a lot of sites, but with a lot of overlap, right? And again, looking at it from the outside, but with some knowledge of the industry, when you have 4 or 5 media sites covering essentially the same thing, it shouldn't come as any surprise that there's going to be a lot of redundancies. And when you're a company that acquired to maximize profits, it should come as no surprise that those redundancies will not be eliminated.
Sure.
Right. And then the other thing I look at is, the market right now for advertising sucks. Trying to sell advertising right now is, with what's going on in the market, not to timestamp it, but, borderline recession, bank failures, and lots of stuff going on that does not fill people with confidence when it comes to spending money, combined with, oddly enough, a glut of inventory where, you should be advertising to sell your excess inventory that you left over with from overstocking during the pandemic. So it's just a weird time where you have all of a sudden you're trying to get rid of as much overhead as possible because you know that the revenue's not coming in. And then, so the flip side of that is, how do you do that, right? Well, you could fire people, you could cut back on content. And so if you cut back on content, but that content is the thing that's driving your eyeballs and driving your page views that you can go sell against, you're sort of shooting yourself in the foot, right? So there's a lot of weird stuff going on right now. And I think, I don't know, that's kind of
that's
my take on why the consolidation has happened, but also why it's, maybe going to make it really, really hard, because as you saw with some other very popular sites, a lot of, they had to let a few people go, because this is, again, my personal opinion. I don't see those a third-party company's numbers or anybody's payroll, but there were some people who were pretty popular that, rumor had it, were making a fair bit more than the average cycling journalist. And so, if you're purely a numbers person looking at this, you're probably going to try and trim the highest paid people if you don't think it's going to dramatically impact your bottom line. Now, that company may have made some mistakes, but, here we are.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of things happening in the market right now, in particular with, like you were saying, all these factors that are coming in. So it's incredibly complex. But I guess, so with all this said, where do you see things going, in the next few years with regards to cycling?
Man, it's going to be, I think, a lot of smaller players. There'll be a few standouts, right? And then there'll be people who had done it for a year or so and thought, okay, I gave it a good try, not really gaining traction. I need to focus on my family, my job, my whatever, right? Or try something different. There's going to be a few people that get their little niche that just really resonates, and they're doing something different enough, and they'll probably find an audience and do well enough. I've heard from a few brands that they would love to diversify who they reach out with and reach more of these kind of micro and medium-sized influencers. Everybody wants to work with, a more diverse audience, more women, more people of color, this, that, and the other, all the different things besides just us white guys, especially the 40+ white guys that we've all too often marketed to in the past, right, and worked with. So you'll see there's a lot of opportunity there, I think, for women and people of color to do something that really sets them apart and capitalize on the fact that that's where the brands want to spend their money and resources right now as well. So you'll probably see some of those do well. I think, I had this thought, and I've been trying to think of how to word this without pissing somebody off, and it's probably not going to happen. So I'm just going to say it. I look at it, and this is, my perspective as somebody who doesn't like working for somebody else, but is also willing to put in 120% of the effort needed to do something that I believe will do well and benefit me. So I look at where the motivations are for people to work really, really hard under another outlet, right? And this is why I'm so blown away by the amount of effort that my team put in place when I owned Bikerumor, because there was no profit sharing. There was nothing. We just did it because we loved it. And so you're always going to have some people like that who do not want the hassle of starting their own business, because it's, it's hard, right? Like running your own business and managing everything is a lot of work. I mean,
It's no joke.
I was still producing content for Bikerumor, and then I would spend another 4 to 6 hours a day managing it. And that's not normal. Most people aren't going to do 2 jobs at once unless there's an immense upside for them, and so I look at the people who are hustling the hardest on content right now, and they're the people who own the upside. So you have the big conglomerates, and I think the bigger a company gets, if they're not really and truly rewarding their employees in a meaningful way, those people are going to get burnt out on having to do this, that, and the other. And so I think you're going to see the media outlets that are owner operated be the ones that are going to be way more successful in the future, right? I'm really curious to see what happens to a few of the legacy sites with a skeleton crew. I mean, I look at, road bike action and the e-bike version of that, and I'm guessing probably mountain bike action soon if they haven't already made that call, right? Like those magazines, even though they had incredible people there, I mean, Zap, right? He's a legend. But it was like Zap and one guy on the e-bikes magazine and like maybe a couple of support crew and like one or two people at mountain bike action, again, other than like maybe a minuscule support crew. And that's excluding ad sales. But you can only run a print publication on a skeleton crew like that for so long before everybody just gets completely fried. And I think some of them had been. I mean, it would be amazing to hear Zap's side of this, but I mean, that dude worked crazy hours for a long, many, many years, right?
So it sounds like where you're getting, Tyler, is that for content to work, there needs to be like real, genuine passion.
Yeah, passion and a massive work ethic, right?
Massive work ethic. And so the ones that are going to be producing the most interesting content are the ones that have the most skin in the game, these kind of upstart bootstrap type. Those are the ones that you think are going to come out with the most interesting stuff, where maybe these legacy publications that are going through some problems, by no fault of their own, I mean, market conditions and stuff like that, are going to be more challenged just because of these conditions, just because that, in your experience as an owner operator of a cycling media outlet, that is the secret sauce.
Yeah, 100%. It's making sure the incentives are aligned. And anecdotally, this is kind of a good thing to watch for the brands, right? At press camps, at press launches and stuff like that. Because we would notice this all the time, right? And I was literally talking to some guys yesterday that put on a multi-brand press event, and they said the same thing, is there are some journalists that go, and typically they're the ones that work for the biggest publications, that it's a vacation, right? It's like, great, I'm getting flown to this awesome place, I'm going to ride. And then sometimes they don't even take their cameras out. And, they're like, okay, well, yeah, when are you going to send me the photos and all the stuff? And then it's a copy paste of the press release with all the stock photos. And you're like, so basically this brand just spent thousands of dollars to fly you here, and they could have just sent you the media kit digitally, and they would have gotten the same thing out of it, and so
do we want to go there, Tyler? Do we want to go?
The brands aren't stupid, right? Like, they notice this, and I think that's where that to me is where, like, if you're a startup and you're just getting going, or you're trying to branch out and launch your own thing, right? Like, if you show up at these things and you're there to work, and it's obvious who is and who isn't, and the content that comes out of it afterwards is next level, you're going to get invited back. And that's literally what I did, right? Like, when press camp started in the US, which, it's rest in peace, that was a great series of events. Like the first year they had it, I found out about it a little bit too late, and we weren't invited because Bikerumor was still pretty small. But I literally, not only did I call the guys that were running press camp and asked them and emailed them and said, hey, hey, can I let me come in. I called my friends who were at the brands that were exhibiting and said, hey, can you tell them you really want me there? And they did. And the next year we were invited. And then they saw how hard I worked, and I was invited every single year. And then after a couple of years of that, as they expanded the number of brands exhibiting, I was like, guys, I can't do this all on my own. I need help. So we were the first ones and the only ones for a couple of years that were able to bring 2 editors to press camp, because they saw what we did, right? So I think, for anybody that's trying to do something like this, if you show that you're doing the work, you will get noticed. And if you're the brands, and you should be paying attention to who's doing the work and reward those people. Make sure they get, especially, and if you're gonna spend some money on advertising, please support the people that are actually putting in the effort, because it's maybe a little more pain in the ass to do like 20 different ad buys, but this is the biggest gripe right now in cycling media, is that the brands just aren't supporting the media, right? They're running their ads through Facebook and social, or through Google AdSense, because it is cheaper. It's far more efficient. But what happens is you're making Facebook and Google really wealthy, and you're starving the cycling media that you say you want to succeed and you say you need to reach the people that you want to reach. So, if you're not putting your dollars where your mouth is, then don't be surprised when you're not getting the coverage. And unfortunately, I think that's what's happening too now, is like the brands are having to focus so much on the media is having to focus so much on the brands that do help pay the bills, that the ones that aren't are kind of not getting the coverage that they would like to. So it's, chicken and the egg.
Well, it sounds to me like at the end of the day, sure, it is cheaper to use Facebook and those types of ads. It's immediate, but you're not getting that more personal touch, because I mean, I think people very, very quickly will trust a publication over a Facebook ad like 10x, just because it's more of an authority. You've got a journalist talking about it. So I mean, I think they both have their place. I guess at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to the mix that shakes out with what these brands are going to want to invest in. But obviously, the journalism side of it, it's a different type of coverage, and people, especially, and then when you get someone behind it that's passionate about it, and that is finding those really unique aspects of it. It's an enjoyable, it's a super enjoyable medium, and I don't think it's going anywhere. But like we said, it's not the easiest moment right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it could depend somewhat on how you're measuring it too, right? Like there's a lot of brands that use external PR and ad buying agencies. And so if the person at the brand is only seeing, like kind of like this bulk data, right? Like, okay, we got you X number of impressions and this, that, and the other, and it doesn't really matter necessarily where those impressions were, then that's different between coming in and saying, oh, we got you, like fewer impressions, but they were on these sites and there was a deeper impression and all this, right? So like if they were buying AdSense and Facebook ads for a brand, and they could come in and say, look, we got you 2 million impressions at this CPM and it's super low, we got you a lot of exposure, then that person might go to their boss and say, yeah, hey, look, this is successful. We had this huge thing and the CPM was really low. We got all this exposure. That's a lot different exposure than what you said, right? Like this deeper, more storytelling or feature kind of
Authority.
visual display and saw this. Yeah. But so it depends on what information is getting up the chain to the person who says yes or no to the budget. And, ultimately that's, the media can only do so much with that. It's up to the people at the brands to recognize that, hey, maybe the data I'm seeing isn't the best data. It might be accurate data, but maybe it's not good data. I don't know.
Sure. Well, did you have any other stuff you wanted to go over today, Tyler? I think we hit a lot of the stuff we wanted to talk about.
There's a lot of stuff I'd love to talk about. I think, you and I talked before. There's going to be a part 2. There's got to be a part 2 to this, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now.
I think we went super deep on the state of media. I thought that was really good. I thought we talked really about I think we went through Bikerumor really well. But like when we got into the stuff about the evolution of media, but how your experience with personnel, I think that's really interesting. But
can we talk about user supported media for just a second?
Sure.
So this is not something that I personally plan on ever doing or enjoy, but it's really interesting what's happening now. So if you look at, Outside for a long time had subscriber options, and so many major news outlets, Washington Post, New York Times, they all have subscriber supported news media, right?
The paywall we're talking
about. Yeah. Okay. And so there's the reason why I've always not liked it is because I think it sort of goes against what the brand should be looking for a couple of reasons. So if I were a brand and spending money to advertise and my ad is showing up behind a paywall, then I'm not reaching everybody who looks at that site, or I'm only reaching a very select few. And you could argue that, well, you're probably reaching a more affluent audience, people with more disposable income. So that's probably a good thing because they're spending money to subscribe to the service. But what bothers me more is that if I were a brand and I were paying to have a writer come to my event, like if you think about, like, I just went to the SRAM launch in Portugal, right? I mean, all in, it probably cost them about $5,000 to bring me there, right? So if I were a brand spending $5,000 to bring an editor somewhere, and my story is only going to show up behind a paywall and reach this very small audience of people, why would I do that versus bring somebody from an outlet that doesn't have a paywall and is going to reach everywhere, because I've actually found a Google result for a story that was then behind a paywall on a new cycling product launch, right? So here I have my product. If I were the brand, my product showed up on this great search result, which wasn't my own website, which that's a whole other thing. How many times a brand's product doesn't even show up on their own website on the first 2 or 3 pages of search, which is crazy to me. But now this story, people might click to go read, and it's behind a paywall and they can't read it. So that search result's wasted, right? Like, it's not just wasted for the brand, it's wasted for the media, because I don't go and on a whim just subscribe to read one story that I found in search, because there's 20 other results right behind it that are probably just as good. The other thing that amuses me to no end, and on one in particular, is like, okay, they charge X, let's just say it's $100 a year to subscribe. And every single week I get some offer, last chance, subscribe now for 50% off. This week only 60% off. Like, I would never have to pay full price. And not only that, but they remind me every single week that I'm never going to have to pay full price for this subscription. So they're kind of cheapening it as it is. But the bigger problem to me is that they're always coming to you with a handout. Their hands out, like, please give to me, please, sir, please, may I have another?
But it may work. It may work.
Oh, they're definitely making money off of that. And so if you look at this one, was super interesting to me, and I'm really curious to see how this works out, right? So the Escape Collective, the one that just launched with a lot of the people that left Cycling Tips and the whole outside family. I actually did the math here. Let me pull up my notes real quick. So the last I looked before they switched their view was they were offering 2 plans, right? Like a lifetime for $1,000 or an annual for $99. And so the last I looked, right before they said they raised everything they wanted, they had 4,247 annuals and 144 lifetimes. So grand total 564,000 and change, right? So they raised a little over 500,000 reader supported. What I'm really curious to watch, and I wish those guys all the luck in the world, right? It's a great experiment. And I think this is the perfect example of, now it's owner operated, right? It's not just owner operated, but it's reader supported. So it's a really cool experiment.
They're in that kind of passion community exclusivity, which cycling loves, man. I mean, look at Rafa, it's the community, it works. So, I mean,
yeah. But here's the thing. Okay, so this is my analysis, right? As an entrepreneur who runs things super
I could see you're watching closely this.
I am, because look at their list of contributors, and there's some big names on there, right? There's some very, very popular names who produce some great content. They were also some of the highest paid cycling journalists in the world. So if you take that 500,000 and spread it against the entire list, and granted, some are going to be full-time, some are probably just going to be 1 or 2 a month contributors, but that list is probably 5 times the staff at Bikerumor, right? And I can tell you right now, $500,000
doesn't go very far.
They're going to burn through that so fast. And so the interesting thing that I'm going to be watching is all the people that subscribed right off the bat to support them. Hey, yes, I want to, get my name on the list. Maybe, I'm not just saying it was all virtue signaling, right? Like, I want to support media.
It's community, right? Tyler. I think they're touching the right buttons with regards to community.
Yeah.
I mean, cycling is community. There is virtue signaling that goes on. Like, why the 100%. Heck? Why would you even have 5 bikes? You don't need 5 bikes. You have 5 bikes,
or 25,
or 25. Or why would you buy a Rafa jersey? Because there is some, there's some signaling happening. It's community, though. I mean,
but what happens a year from now, or even like 2 months from now, right? Are people going to keep subscribing, or when you don't get your name on their website anymore, are you going to subscribe or resubscribe? That's and I hope they're successful. That's what I'm curious about. Yeah,
it's interesting. And we'll see if the community element is strong enough, because what you're saying is they probably, to burn through that, they're going to have a fair amount of growth for it to be sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and readership growth too, right? Because again, if I were a brand looking at this, those guys are really going to hate me after this, but so you have roughly 4,500 supporters, meaning roughly 4,500 readers,
but deep,
that are all behind a paywall. Yeah, but
deep.
4,500 people is a really small drop in the bucket compared to the million plus readers that
Right, but maybe
the bigger
they're
non-paywall
but
sites
maybe
have.
they're but maybe they're the thought leaders. I don't know. Like, they're the deepest of the deep, and it's sort of like, Patagonia's pro program. You know how that works, right? Where it's like they give a 50% discount or 30 or whatever to people that work in the industry. So people that work in the industry are going to wear the clothing. They perceive them as, the power users. So I don't know. I'm trying to play devil's advocate here because I think
No, yeah, it's a great
just
point.
to serve the conversation, because I see that you've been in this business, you're really watching this closely, and you're curious about it, and it's really nice to talk about it. And I think we need to get these guys on and have a little conversation with them as well.
Yeah, you absolutely should. Now and then in a year, and the same, right? Like, I'd
Yeah.
love to come back on in a few months and talk about some other things. But
This is
yeah,
like-
and this, like I said, I wish these guys all the luck, and I really do. Like, I hope it's successful because I think it's going to drive the right kinds of change in the media industry. But this was just my kind of like take on it from an entrepreneur. It's like, man, me trying to figure out, right? Like, how is this going to work? How are you going to make this work with these numbers and these financial needs and that size team and all this? It's super interesting.
I think we need to talk to these guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, this was cool. I'm glad we got to talk. I think next time maybe we can dive into kind of some deeper topics. One thing that I talked to about that came up a few times today, I was actually talking to Renee Wirtz from 3T 2 days ago. And he mentioned that when he bought 3T in 2007, it was a brand that hadn't had a ton of investment for a few years. And so he saw it and he was like, this brand, people are affectionate to this brand. People have passion about this specific brand. And we got to where we were talking about, in cycling, there is how do I say it? There's a passion for the equipment and the products that is so strong compared to other products, right? Like, people irrationally love the products that they use. They absolutely just really have a really strong relationship with these products. I don't know. Can you talk to that concept a little bit? And not necessarily that they're the old legacy products that they grew up with, but is this something that you agree with, that you see that people, when they're doing this hobby, this passion, that they really do create like a really strong relationship with these brands?
Oh man. Man, you just teed up something I was thinking of so well. Thank you. Yeah, so to talk about products, yes, absolutely. And 3T is a really good example of a brand that's done content, right? Like, they had the Expedition 3 storytelling series that produced some amazing, visual storytelling about riding really cool places on their bikes. Yeah, I mean, and talk about branded content, we could do a whole episode just on that. But the short of it is, yeah, so he kind of injected that passion that people have for using their products to do really cool things and turned it into some amazing stories. And they've also produced some pretty killer bikes and designs and pushed it a little bit since he took over. And Renee's a great guy. I think when you can capitalize, you said you had Rafa on the prior episode, and they're another one that did it, right? Like, they just kind of turned clothing into this, lust-worthy object with a great story behind it. I mean, the story could be totally made up, right? Who knows?
Right.
But they inspired like an entire new new kind of subset of clothing of, there's a lot of brands now that have that premium look and feel, those kind of deeper, darker earth tone colors or whatever that, very clearly were inspired at some level by what Rafa did. And kudos to Rafa being able to sell, whether or not you like who bought them, they were able to build something truly amazing along those lines. And this is something I've thought about for so long. And I both am glad I didn't, but also kick myself for not having built the audience. And so I look at a lot of the people that launched Escape Collective, they all have pretty sizable social media followings, and they do a really thorough job of reinforcing one another on social. And the algorithms love that, right?
Sure.
And so I think sometimes, like, oh man, I should have spent the time building my own social media presence, right? Like building up Tyler, You know, if I had 20,000 followers, I could go launch whatever I wanted and bring with me enough people to fund that, right? And I think those people did that. You know, they took those audience, they took that loyal following that they've cultivated for years and years, where they made as much, not just about the content they've created, but as much about themselves as personalities, right?
Right,
And
but
thought leaders.
yeah, and that and
Oh,
that
it worked.
it
Right?
works.
Clearly, it worked.
It works. It works. And you know, it's never too late to start that, but it
Yeah.
does
I'm so far behind.
no,
But also, like, I really don't want to spend. It takes so much time and energy. Like, look at how often a lot of these people are posting. I'm like, man, what else are you doing during the day? Like, I got so much other stuff I'd rather do than post on social. I hate the idea of it.
you have to, it has to come natural though, Tyler. I mean,
Yeah.
like, because I also, you know, I do consulting for social media, and I do some thought leadership stuff, but it does need to be like something that you want. Because if you don't, if it's not something that's like inside you, that it's going to come off as, you know, it's going to come off as in not genuine. And
Yeah.
so, you know, if you're not doing it already, I mean, if it's something that you really want to do, yeah, I mean, go for it. But if
No, I
it's,
really don't want to do it.
then you won't. And don't, because it's, people are going to tell.
Yeah.
People will tell.
Yeah. But and how I think that ties into what you said about like people who are like really affectionate about the brands is right. Like people are really affectionate or really, yeah, I guess affectionate, passionate, thank you, about what these guys and girls have to say. And they want, I think supporting their new endeavor is their way of supporting that person more than like, are they really going to sit and read like long form cycling journalism enough to justify, you know, $1,000 or $99 a year? Who knows? Maybe, right? But they're supporting the people that they like, and therefore supporting the industry that they like in their own little way. And I think that's where they were able to pull off something really special, you know?
It goes back to community.
Yeah.
It goes
So
back to
if Escape Collective or anybody else trying to do this can really make people feel like a part of a community, then they'll succeed for sure, right? Because that's what people want, especially now, right? Everybody feels so distant and so polarized.
But cycling is community though, man. It's like, it goes back to like, I have a 3T stem, or I have a Cinelli bike, or I have a Bianchi bike because I want to show that I know that I'm part of that community, right? And it all goes back. And maybe it's more road cycling, I don't know, but like in also in mountain biking, like a Yeti bike, that's like a symbol, right?
Yeah, 100%. And then, you know, maybe like just thinking out loud, maybe that's where the whole outerverse thing really failed, is that it never seemed authentic and genuine, right? Like they were trying to create a community built around, you know, ownership of this NFT, but it was really forced. You know, the conversations on their Discord felt really forced. Nothing felt natural or easy about it. And, you know, never mind that it never really worked. You know, it was kind of clunky the way they built it too. Sorry,
Maybe
Robin. It was a good idea. I think it was a great idea. It was just really poorly executed. You know, and I say that from having been part of Bike Club, where we never actually executed. You know, we had a lot of ideas and talked about a lot of things, and to date, you know, like full disclosure, I've backed out of the project, so I have no idea what's going on with it right now. But you know, it's hard. You know, it's hard to foster that level of community, especially trying to like create something from scratch and do it. And so I think that's where, you know, much like these legacy brands like Cinelli and 3T have that passionate user base, right? Like they didn't develop that overnight. You know, they've spent years and decades fostering that. And I think, you know, from the media side, if you can, yeah, like you said, it's never too late to start, but you should have started 3 years ago, 10 years ago, developing your audience.
Well,
right?
the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. Isn't that the same?
Exactly. Yeah. Now you'd be lying in the shade of it now if you had, right?
But no, it's community, and it's really interesting that we're touching on this, because maybe cycling, just because it's such a personal experience, you know, maybe it could never be really that big from a conglomerate standpoint or whatever, like we're talking about, because it does need that personal touch. It's like those, like I live in Italy, and there's all these restaurants all over the place that it's just like one family. You go in there and you're like, this place is amazing. And then you think to yourself, well, man, they should open another one down the street. But it wouldn't work, because it wouldn't be the same guy doing the things that he does. You know, you can't replicate that. You can't scale it. And so maybe, you know,
Right.
in a certain sense, cycling has some limits on the scalability, and maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, personality, right? It's oh man, I was thinking of the perfect thing while you were saying that, and now it just flittered away.
Fluttered away.
Yeah, maybe, you know, maybe that community and personality is the next generation of cycling media, right? Like if you can create something that's
It could be.
more inclusive,
could-
and I don't say that in like the vogue way of saying inclusivity of like having people from all genders and races and everything in there, but more just feeling like you're included in something,
that's
and even have a voice in some small way, right? Like that's where, so maybe that's the next killer app, is not just doing it right, but like if you look at, I'm just going to keep using Escape Collective as an example in this, but it could be anything, right? Like if they can build out something that allows for true community participation, that's going to be different, right? Like, I mean, I've fiddled around with Discord, or, you know, there's Facebook groups and all this other stuff, but
that are powerful.
um,
That are powerful if you get the right group. But
yeah,
it's like
because you're building on somebody else's platform still, right?
that's true. Like it's, I mean, if we're talking about business here, you know, we're kind of you know, the bed sheet is only so big. Like you pull one side, it's like, okay, we go to Discord, but it's like, you know, it's not always easy to monetize something like that. So, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're kind of jumping around here, but I think at the end of the day, we really are kind of coming back to these ideas of how passion and how community are kind of intertwined with the business of cycling, and that they are sort of the drivers of some of these things like media or the products themselves. So, but
The weird antithesis to all that, of course, is like Bicycling Magazine, right? So, and there's some great writers at Bicycling. I'm not knocking them in any way, but if you look at what their content plan is, a lot of it is shared and syndicated across all the fitness, women's health, men's health portfolio sites and magazines that they have. It's very very surface level, you know, general interest type stuff, like how to ride your first century, right? How to
why
burn 200 calories on your spin ride today. But they're massive, right? Massive. They're like one of the few bikes that's still on the newsstand when you go into the airport magazine shop, right?
Sure.
Or, you know, and they just get ridiculous traffic numbers. And so it's, if you talk
that's different. That's a different animal, I think.
It is, but like that, maybe that's how you scale, right? So you can take the cycling topic, I'm using air quotes, and scale it that way. But the whole passion thing, yeah, like you're either going to have to, you're just going to have to boil it down to a niche and be okay with the fact that maybe your traffic's never going to be huge.
No, and it sounds like with Bikerumor that you did sort of hit, you know, the level of, or at least with in your experience, that like that ceiling, and there is an absolute ceiling on all this stuff. I mean, there's only so many people that can buy bikes. So, you know, you just kind of have to try and find that niche and then reach as many people as you can, you know, like-minded people. But again, like the engine of all this is the quality of the content, the quality of the product, and, you know, kind of to be genuine about it. So yeah, you can't fake this stuff, man.
No, especially not if you're trying to speak to the core audience, right? Because they
know
realize it in a second.
They know. It's just, cycling is so niche, man. It's so niche.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think we can wrap it up here, man. I really enjoyed talking to you. I'm glad we got to talk about that project. It sounds like the paywall project we were talking about, that sounds like, you know, we're watching that closely because it's kind of an innovation that's happening. So we'll keep an eye on that. But yeah, man, I really appreciate your time and coming on. And where can people find you on your social medias?
If they want to see not much posted, they can go to @Tyler Benedict on everything. That's where you'll find me.
Okay, @Tyler Benedict. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you.